Let me show you how to make a waistcoat. Hi guys, it's Viv here and you're welcome to my channel Tailored by Viv. I share sewing tutorials here and helpful tips, so if you love sewing like I do, you want to click on that subscribe button now. Now let's get straight into today's tutorial. I'll start by marking out my starting line. From the edge of my paper, I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll mark my start line there. I'll be taking all my measurements from the start line. From the start line, I'll be marking my jacket length. My jacket length is 21 inches and I'm going to mark that here. The next line I want to mark is my chest line. For those who may not know how to get their chest line, the formula is your bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. And then you're going to add an extra 1 inch for your shoulder slope. So for a bust of 37, I'm going to mark 9 inches as my chest line. And I'll go ahead to draw out the line. The next line I'm marking is my half length. We're starting with the front block, so I'll mark my front half length measurement. Because of the rise of the bust, the front half length measurement and the back half length measurement are not the same. So you want to measure your front half length and your back half length. My front half length is 17 inches and I'm going to mark 17 inches here. Now from the center front, I'll be going in by 1 inch for my button allowance. I'll be marking that and I'll draw a straight line there. It is from this line that I'll be taking all my horizontal measurements. I'll be marking my shoulder width here. My shoulder is 16. 16 divided by 2, that's 8. I'll go ahead and mark 8 inches. And I'll draw a straight line from the start point to the chest line. Next, I'll be imputing my bust circumference measurements. My bust is 37. 37 divided by 4, that is 9.25 inches. I'll go ahead and mark that. I'll also be adding 1 cm for ease. You can add between 0.5 cm to 1 cm depending on the amount of ease you want on your block. On the half length line or waistline, I'm going to be imputing a quarter of my waist measurement. My waist is 32. 32 divided by 4, that is 8 inches. I'm going to mark that and I will add 1 inch for my dart. I'll also be adding an extra 1 cm for my ease. At the hemline, which is the full jacket length, I'll be imputing a quarter of my upper hip circumference. Now you want to measure around your upper hip where the jacket will stop. Mine is 40 inches and I'll be taking a quarter of that, which is 10 inches. I'll also be adding 1 cm for ease. Now I'll go ahead to draw a line connecting all these points together. Here I'm coming down by 1 inch from my start point to mark my shoulder slope. From the center front line, which is the button allowance line, I'm going in by 3 inches. And I'll connect those 2 points together with a slant line. From the chest line, I'll go up by 3.5 inches. And at that point, I will come in by half an inch. And I'll go ahead to draw my armhole curve. The next line I want to mark is my underbust line. From my shoulder to underbust is 14 inches. I'm just going to mark that. From my underbust line, I'll go up by 3 inches to get my bust point line. Now, if you have your bust point measurement, you can just mark that without marking the underbust line. The reason I mark the underbust line is because I don't have the bust point measurement. So this is a bonus tip for you. If you don't know your bust point measurement, you can come up from your underbust by 3 inches to get your bust points. Next, I'll be taking my bust dart. From the bust point line, I'll come down by 2 inches for my bust dart. The bust dart is the difference between the front half length and the back half length. Remember I mentioned that the front half length is longer than the back half length because of the rise of the bust. So to reconcile this difference in the half length, we'll be making use of the bust dart. But before I mark out my bust dart, I want to take in my waist dart. So on the waistline, I'll go in by 3.5 inches, which is half the width of my nipple to nipple measurement. I'll be taking in 1 inch on the waistline, which is the dart allowance that we left. So I'll be marking half inch on each side. Then I'll go ahead to draw my dart legs to the bust point line and to the hem line. Then I can go ahead to draw out my bust dart. From the 2 inches points that were marked, I'll connect it to meet the 3.5 inches line. Next, I'll be measuring from my shoulder tip to the point where the shoulder slope started from, that is the 3 inches mark. I'll be dividing this measurement into 2 and I'll mark the midpoint. From that midpoint, I will draw a line to meet the bust point. I'll be leaving the front block like this for now to work on the back block because I will need to cut it out to continue my alterations. I just want to draw a straight line from the start line to demarcate the front from the back. This line I am drawing will serve as my center back line. I'll start by marking the jacket length. The jacket length we marked in front is 23 inches, but because of our bust dart, the back length will be shorter than the front length. So we'll be reducing the jacket length for the back by 2 inches, which is our bust dart. So you make use of the value you have for your own bust dart. From the slat line, I'll just go ahead and mark 21 inches for my jacket length. Next, I'll mark my chest line, which is 9 inches. And I'll mark my back half length, which is 15 inches. I'll go ahead to mark my shoulder width measurement. On the waistline, I'll be coming in by half inch from the center back line. This is to shapen the waist as our spine is not straight. From that point, I'll go ahead to connect it to the initial center back line just like this. So this line we just created is our new center back line, and it is from this point we'll be taking all our horizontal measurements. On the chest line, I'll go ahead to mark a quarter of my bust measurements. I'll also add my ease just like we did in front. On the waistline, I'll be adding a quarter of my waist measurements plus 1 inch for my dart and an extra 1 cm for my ease. At the hem, I'll mark the same thing we did in front, 10 inches plus 1 cm for ease. I'll go ahead and connect all those points together. Next, I'll mark my shoulder slope just the way we did in front. So go in by 3 inches and come down by 1 inch, then you draw your slope. From the chest line, I'll come up by 4 inches and I'll go in by half inch to draw my armhole. For the back neckline, I'll be using a width of 3 inches and a depth of 1 inch. I'll go ahead to mark out my neckline. On the waistline, I'll be marking my dart. From the center back line, I'll go in by 3.5 inches and I'll mark it. Now because the center back line is slanted and not straight, we can't mark 3.5 inches all along it. So what I'll do, from the initial center back line, which is the straight line we drew, I'll be checking what I have for the waist. Remember we came in by half inch, so we'll be having 4 inches instead of 3.5 inches. So using the straight line as a guide, I'll be marking 4 inches all along it. This will give me a straight line for the dart. Then I'll go ahead to mark half inch on both sides on the waistline and I'll draw my dart leg. Now I just want to separate the two blocks so I can continue working on the front. So I'll just cut out the front block while I set aside the back. I'll be plotting my armhole princess dart next. So I just want to go ahead and slash open my shoulder dart. I'll be slashing it open up to the bust point. And then I will close up my bust dart. I'm closing it up by folding one leg of the dart, that is the bottom dart leg. I'm folding it over the top dart leg. You can just watch to see what I'm doing. You want to make sure you're folding accurately over the lines. You can see how closing the bust dart transferred it to the shoulder. What I want to do next is to measure this opening on the shoulder. So I'll place my tape this way and I'll measure it. I'll be dividing the value I get by 4. So I'll just fold my tape over this way twice to get the value. So I'll fold it once and I'll fold it again, or you can just do the calculation and get your value. I'll be marking the value I have here, and I'll also extend the shoulder measurement by that same value. What I want to do next is to draw a straight line connecting that value that we just marked to the bust point. The essence of doing this is to tighten the shoulder and the armhole, as we'll be plotting our armhole princess dart. From the extension on the shoulder, I'll be drawing a new armhole. So I'll just go ahead and connect it this way. This is now our new armhole. The next thing I want to do is to close the shoulder dart. So I'll be folding it over that line that we just made and I'll be taping it down. Just watch to see what I'm doing. To mark the armhole style line, from the shoulder tip, I'll come down by 4 inches and I'll mark it. Then I'll go in with my ruler to connect the 4-inch point back into my bust point. Thus, we have created the armhole princess style line. Because of the tightening we did on the shoulder, the armhole princess style line is already tightened and we don't have to do any other thing to it. The next thing I want to mark is my front neckline. For the neck depth, I'm marking 3 inches, which is the basic neck depth measurement. And then I'll determine how deep I want my neckline to be. So you can place your tape on your collarbone and check how deep you would want it to be. For me, I'm working with a depth of 6 inches. So I'll place my tape on the 3 inches mark I made earlier and I'll come down by 6 inches. And I'll go ahead to draw out my neckline. Please note that the width of the neckline is 3 inches. I'll be closing my bust dart and taping it down permanently this time. After closing the bust dart, you will notice that the side lines are not matching up. So I'll just use my ruler to connect those points and match up the lines. The next thing I want to do is to reshape the armhole. From the neck width, I will measure 2 inches, and from that point, I will redraw my armhole just like this. We're almost done with this pattern. The last thing I want to do is to reshape the bottom. I'll be going up by 3 inches from the hem and I'll shape it with a curve to meet the dart leg. You can just watch to see what I'm doing. At the side, I'll go up by 2 inches and I will shape it this way. Please note that you can shape the bottom whichever way you want, but this is just how I'm shaping mine. Our front pattern is ready. I'll just go ahead to label my center front and my side front and I'll cut out my pattern. Coming back to the back block, I want to plot my armhole princess style line. I'll come down by 3 inches from the shoulder tip, and from this point I'll connect back to the dart line. The next thing I want to do is to tighten the armhole dart. So from this line we just drew, I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll draw another line connecting it back to the dart line. From the armhole curve, I'll be going up by the amount of tightening we used. That is, I'll be coming up by 1 inch and I'll redraw a new armhole curve. I'll be closing this dart so I can redraw the proper armhole that we'll be using. From the neckline, I'll go in by 2 inches and I'll redraw the armhole just like I did in front. The next thing I want to do is to shape the hem of the back block. From the side, I'll go up by 2 inches just like we did in front, and I'll shape it out this way. For this part, I'll come up a bit by ½ inch on the center back and I'll shape it out this way. Coming up by ½ inch is optional though. So now that my pattern is ready, I'll go ahead and cut it out. So our front and back pattern is set, and now it's time to transfer it to our fabric. I'll be adding ½ inch allowance all around the pattern. That is on the neckline, on the shoulder, on the sides and on the hem. I'll do this for all the pattern pieces. I'll be making use of this crepe fabric. When choosing your fabric, you want to make sure that it is not too stretchy. So you can make use of a fabric with little or no stretch. I also have my suit lining here. For the fabric, I have about 2 yards here, but 1.5 is enough. And for the lining, I have about 1 yard. So I'll go ahead to cut out. So I already cut out my fabric, and you can see the ½ inch allowance I added all around it. I cut out 2 pieces each for the fabric and for the lining. For the center front block, I cut out 4 pieces of the fabric. That's because I'll be using the fabric as the lining for this part. I also cut out hairstay interfacing which I'll be attaching to the lining part. I'll be taking this to the sewing machine to attach all those pieces together. You want to make sure you take note of the side front and the side back pieces so you don't end up mixing them. So I'll be sewing fabric to fabric and lining to lining. I'll go ahead to do the joining now. So I'm done joining all the pieces together. This is the fabric part and you can see what it looks like. After joining the pieces, I went ahead to notch all the parts that are a bit curved so it can relax better. I also pressed open all my seam lines. I've also fixed my welt pocket as you can see. Now if you don't know how to fix a welt pocket, I have a detailed tutorial on this. I'll be dropping the link in the description box, so do well to check it out. I've also joined my lining pieces together and this is what it looks like. The next thing I want to do is to join my lining to the main fabric. I'll be placing it this way, right side facing right side. I'll go ahead to match up all the seam lines. You want to make sure everything matches up correctly. I'll pin them down just to secure it, and I'll take it over to the sewing machine to sew down with half-inch sewing allowance. So I'm done sewing it down. I'll just go ahead to notch all along the length of the seam to help it relax better when I turn it over. I'll be turning it over to top stitch on my lining. Now I'll make sure that the seam is facing the lining, and I'll go ahead to sew it down. When you get to the pointed edge, it might be a bit tricky sewing around there. So what I'll do is I'll just end my stitch here, and I'll go ahead to continue from the other side. So I'm done with the hem. The next thing I want to do is to turn my armhole opening. Just like we did before, I'll go ahead to match up my seam lines on the main fabric and on the lining. Right side facing right side. I'll go ahead to pin this down to keep it in place. I'll go ahead to stitch it all around with half-inch sewing allowance. I'll trim off some of the excess allowance to reduce the bulk, and I'll also notch all around it to help it relax better. And then I will turn it over to the right side and top stitch on the lining part, making sure my seam allowance is facing the lining. So I'm done turning it over, and this is what we have currently. I'll go ahead to repeat the same process on this other side. I'm done turning the two armholes, and you can see that I've opened up the center back of the lining. This is because we are about turning over the center front, and everywhere will be sealed up, so we need space to turn it over to the right side when we're done closing it. I'll flip it over to the wrong side so I can sew my back neckline, and I'll close the center front. I'll go ahead to sew down the back neckline with half-inch sewing allowance, after which I will notch round it, and I'll turn over to the right side to stop stitch it. From the armhole, I'm just measuring 2 inches, just so I'll know where to start my sewing from. I'll do the same thing for the center front because I want both shoulder seams to align. And then I'll go ahead to close up my center front and my back neckline. I'll be turning it over to the right side through this opening we made on the lining. This is the essence of the opening, so all our rough sewing will be inside for neat finishing. I'll go ahead to top stitch around my neckline. So far, this is what we have. The next thing I want to do is to join the shoulders together. To join the shoulders together, I'll be doing it this way. I'll pick one part and I will put it into the second one. In this case, I'm putting the front shoulders into the back shoulder and I'll be bringing it out through that opening we left at the center back lining. We want to have a clean finished look with all the sewing inside. So just watch carefully to see what I'm doing. Now that I've brought it out, I'm just going to arrange it properly and then I'll go ahead to sew it down with my half-inch sewing allowance. After sewing, I'll trim off the excess allowance and when I turn it over to the right side, this is what it looks like and you can see how neatly finished it is. I'll repeat this process for the second shoulder. We're almost done with the sewing of this jacket. The next thing I'll be doing is to close this opening we have. I'll be using the invisible stitching technique and I'll show you how to do that. I'll be making use of my hand needle and thread. This technique involves passing our needle through the seam allowance in a zigzag manner. Since my seam lines are already ironed, it will make the process much more easier. So I've knotted the end of my thread. Now I won't be starting immediately at the opening. I'll go a little bit below it, maybe half inch, just so that my thread is firm and doesn't unravel. Now I'm passing it from the inside through the seam allowance. I'm doing this on one part. I'm passing it inside out. I'll pass my needle over to the other side. I'll put it in and I'll bring it out about quarter of an inch above the entry point on that same seam line. I'll pass my needle over to the other side and I'll repeat the same thing. You can just watch carefully to see what I'm doing so you understand better. Over here, I think you can see clearer what I was trying to explain. You can see how I'm passing my needle through that seam line which we loosened earlier to create the opening. So it's through that half-inch sewing allowance that I'm passing my needle on each side. So I'll be going over it in a crisscross pattern until I get to the end. When I pull on the thread, you will notice how all the stitches close up neatly to conceal the thread. So guys, this is how you go about the invisible stitching. I'll be repeating this process until I get to the end of the opening. When I get to the end, I will knot my thread and tie it to secure it. So I'm done sealing it up and you can see what we have currently. You can see the effects of the invisible stitching technique and how neat it looks. So guys, we're done with this jacket. You can see how neat the inside looks and this is what the outside looks like. What's left is to fix the buttonholes and the buttons. So that's it for our jacket tutorial. If this video was helpful to you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also share this video and subscribe to my channel for more helpful tutorials like this. Till we see you again in the next tutorial. Bye for now.